Hey, 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 good afternoon, good day, good morning, whatever time it is for you. Happy day to you. It is the Rick and Dave Real Estate Solutions podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dave Stein. I'm a real estate agent, real estate investor, commercial lender, broker. I wear too many hats. They don't fit. I'm taking it day by day. Love being here. I'm joined by my co-host, Rick Bain. Rick, tell us a little about yourself.
I'm Rick Bain. Like Dave said, I'm a real estate investor. I'm a gator. I'm in sub two. I'm a commercial lending partner with Investion. So you've got a multifamily, if you've got a piece of commercial property you need lending, please give me a call. We'd love to speak with you. And I'm also a business coach. So love to talk to you about doing some business coach or some wellness coaching, my side gig. So today we got David Johanson. I heard known David for, I think it's a couple of years now through the Fargo Moorhead meetup. He's a wealth of knowledge. He gave a great presentation at our last FM meetup. David, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your operation?
Sure. So yeah, I'm another Dave. There's a lot of us. So
We're already best friends.
there you go. There you go. So I'm a real estate investor. So I own some units, and we also have a property management company. So we manage our units and we manage units for other people. And we also have a construction maintenance company that maintains those properties and does snow removal and lawn care. Anything from full-blown rehabs to getting the grass cut. So we kind of do all of that. I've been a businessman for a long time. So business is what I do. I sold a business in California. I lived out there for quite a while and have, basically plowed the proceeds from the sale of that business into real estate here in the Fargo Moorhead area and getting these companies off the ground.
You weren't always a real estate investor, right?
No.
Because you mentioned you sold a business. You have a kind of a diverse background. So just in the highlights, how did you get from in adulthood working for the man and now you're owning a couple of different businesses?
Well, it's interesting. I've actually never applied for a job.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
So I worked for the church for a while, and those were jobs that just came to me. I directed a youth program in inner city Cleveland, and that's a job that was just offered to me. And then I was an ordained Lutheran pastor for years, and I transitioned from that into being a business owner. And so I've actually never interviewed for a job. They've all been offered to me, or I have created them through a small business. Yeah.
That's amazing.
But specifically how I got into real estate, well, there was two things that kind of wetted my whistle. I pastored a church in San Jose, California that was very, very small and had a lot of asset in terms of the physical building. The building itself and the land it was on was worth millions. But the congregation, like many congregations in the San Jose area, was dwindling and dying. And so we sold that building to produce resources to start ministries. And so that was my first experience with selling a large property. And we had to get a bridge loan to make it happen. As soon as we had the bridge loan, we had all these guys coming in and making lowball offers to us because we got on the radar. And then, we had to work with a broker and, having all of these offers and making sense of them. And what is the value of the building? What is the value of the property? How do you determine that? I found it fascinating. And so that was really my first experience with dealing with investors because that's ultimately who was interested. And then I owned a business that was not legal. And so we weren't doing anything illegal, but the property that we were running the business on was not zoned for this business. Basically, I went through the process of going to the city and this is Los Gatos, California, which is notoriously difficult to deal with. And having the property itself, what they did in the end was issue a legal non-conforming status. So they're saying this does not conform to the law, but we're going to let it be here. And that added significant value to the property. The whole process of doing that was just fascinating to me. So, we got attorneys involved and, the city wanted us. We were actually in an unincorporated part of the city. and they wanted us to incorporate. And so anyways, we horse traded until we got to where we wanted to be. And then there's a way you sort of manipulate the political process. Manipulate isn't the right word. You set things up to succeed,
Massage it.
Yeah. And so we worked with an attorney who knew how to do that. And, the whole process of working with the attorney, working with the city, getting that all done, and then seeing how it could add value to the property also interested me. So those were the two things that kind of pointed me towards real estate. And plus, I'd always been told it was lucrative, and I thought it would be cool. I wanted to
sold you on the
be a real estate investor.
Yep.
Yeah.
So how long have you been in the Fargo-Moorhead area?
So my wife and I, we started buying property out here about 5 years ago. I think something like that. About 2 years ago, maybe a little over 2 years ago, we actually moved out here from California. And it's sort of a running joke. I grew up in Minnesota, and so I know what winter is all about, and I like winter. My wife is a California girl. She agreed to move to the Fargo-Moorhead area, and she said, well, I can do anything for 2 years, and then I started pushing her. We'd be laughing about it. I said, well, my wife said she could do anything for 5 years, but it turns out she likes it out here. Anyways, we're loving the Fargo-Moorhead area.
So Dave, if I remember the story right, when you originally got into real estate investing, you weren't managing your own properties, or you were, but there was some, tell us how you went from just investor to property manager.
Yeah. So when we first started buying properties here, we lived in California. So the properties had to get managed, and it was going to be very difficult. And they were all value add properties. So these were the first portfolio I bought. The properties were tore up from the floor up. And so I was going to need somebody local to help me out. And so I interviewed a few companies, actually. I interviewed one very large and one sort of medium-sized management company. And I ultimately decided to go with the guy who I would be his first client. So he was backed by somebody I trusted. And I knew that I was going to need to be able to pick up the phone and get an answered call. I knew that I was going to need somebody who was really motivated to succeed for me. And I just didn't believe any of the other management companies were going to be that. I was going to be a rather small portfolio for them, and I believed I was going to get the attention that deserved. And that, to me, was a recipe to fail. So I hired this young guy who had never managed properties before, and truthfully, he did a really good job. When we finally got here, it became obvious to me that if these properties were really going to succeed, they needed another level of project management. And also the guy who was managing them, and I'm not throwing him under the bus at all. He really worked hard for me for a long time, but he decided that he only really wanted to manage short-term properties and A-class properties. And I'm not an A-class investor. And so it was the perfect opportunity really for me to take on that whole management side of it. And once we kind of figured out how to do that, we realized we could do this for a lot of people. And actually, we realized that not many people were doing it well, that there's a lot of bad property management out there. And nobody goes into property management to fail or to do a bad job or to have frustrated property owners and frustrated tenants. The truth is that property management is hard. And the other part of it is a lot of people who get into it, they get into it because they're interested in being a real estate investor. And being a real estate investor is different than managing a business that has a lot of operations. So the operations side of property management is huge. And unless you have kind of experience in operations, I think, if you kind of go into it just thinking it's like running an investment company, you're going to have a problem. Yeah. So anyways, we thought we could add value to the market. And so we started our property management company. I bought a small snow removal company, got some equipment through that and some talent, and just kind of began to build the company. Yeah.
Property management always seems to be one of those things that looks easy from the outside. I mean, how hard can it be, right? If you can clean, if you can shovel, that must be it, right? But once you start to dive into it and talk to people that are using property management, it's amazing how many moving parts there are within it and how many responsibilities they actually have. Could you kind of go into a lot of those moving parts? And there's a lot of dynamics. It's not nearly as easy as I think people believe from the outside.
So what I have realized and come to just truly believe is that property management is actually project management. Let me say that again. Property management is actually project management. And every portfolio is a project, and every property in that portfolio is its own project. And what's really important is to understand what the investor's goal is. All right. So maybe the investor's goal is that they want these properties always to be positioned to sell because they are going to, if an opportunity comes along where they can expand their portfolio, they're going to sell this property 1031 into something else. That's different than a property owner who says, I'm going to hold these long term. I'm going to hold them forever. So the value of that property on any given day isn't as important to them as the fact that the property is improving over time. And then there are property owners who have no idea what they want. I mean, truthfully, they don't at all. And you'll never succeed as their property manager unless you get clear about what the owner's goal is. So once you know what the owner's goal is, then you could start talk about what the deliverables are, right? So on a high level, what are the things I need to deliver on to accomplish this goal? And then you can start creating a timeline and milestones and set up times to objectively basically take a look at and evaluate your progress towards those goals along the year. So just basically setting up milestones and places to look. So, I mean, I think that's the single most important thing I've learned is the importance of having that overarching framework so that the property manager and the owner and all of the stakeholders within the property management company. So for us, we have somebody who runs and manages and coordinates the management side, and we have somebody who runs and coordinates and manages the maintenance side. They have to know exactly what's going to be expected from them over the next coming year or the 18 months, whatever the project is. So let's say we think to accomplish the owner's goals, it's going to take 18 months, right? So that project ends at 18 months. In other words, if the owner wants to go his own way at the end of that 18 months, that's great with us. Or if we want to take a look and set goals for the next, goal and create another project. But it's really important to know when it begins and when it ends and what has to happen in the middle. So now what happens in the middle between the starting of the project and the end of the project is a bunch of little projects, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel there because project management has been around for a very, very long time, right?
For sure.
So, I mean, what are all of the aspects of that? Well, I'm probably going to miss some of them. First, you have to onboard the property. So that's a project, right? Once a property, and that involves a lot of things that you wouldn't think of. From getting utilities set up to making sure that all the leases are actually in place and the name on the lease matches who lives in the unit to, because you inherit all kinds of crazy stuff to taking an inventory of what condition the building is in and what needs to be done on it, So anyways, there's an onboarding process for the entire, portfolio. And then, you've got, right? So that's a whole process that happens through lease renewals. And then you have unit turns. So units get turned over and they need more or less rehab, and getting that done in a timely fashion is extremely important. And then you have ongoing maintenance, right? That has to happen. And that is, from like my toilet is overflowing to my dishwasher doesn't work to the lights are out and it turns out they didn't pay their electric bill. You know what I mean? You got to trace that down and figure it out. And, or the electric bill never got transferred. We've had this happen where you inherit a property and the tenant who moved in never transferred their electric bill over. And it's actually the tenant previous who's still paying the electric bill, but we didn't manage that transition. So, we don't even know who to reach out to figure out how to get.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, like all the things that can happen. And so you've got your ongoing maintenance that has to get managed. And then you don't want to underplay collections. So, you can go straight to evictions, and that's very expensive. In our experience, it's much better to have a planned out, very clear way that you're going to go through collections to get people caught up on their rent, right? And if that isn't going to happen, to make a decision in a planned amount of time to move it into eviction. But evictions are very expensive. I think the biggest expense so if you're going to be profitable as a property owner, right? You have the income side of it. And so that's about being at market rent. And if there are other things that, dog gonna, charge to have a dog in there, or laundry or whatever. So you have your income side of it, and then you have your expense side of it, right? And expenses destroy profits. 9 times out of 10, the problem isn't with the income, it's with the expense. And that's not always true either.
A lot of times
Destroy profits. That's just a fact.
that's a fact of business.
Vacancy is the biggest expense. It doesn't show up on a profit and loss statement as an expense, but vacancy is an expense. Make no mistake about it. And if you undercut the money you're spending on maintenance, if you undercut the money you're spending on snow removal, if you undercut the money that you're spending on lawn care, and you get that done in a subprime way, to use words that get used differently in real estate thing, but if you do that in a way that is not adequate, you are going to increase your vacancy rate, and vacancy is your largest expense. So it's very easy to go slashing that budget, go, okay, let's get this down, let's get this down, let's get this down, and miss the fact that vacancy is your biggest expense. And the reason that vacancy is your biggest expense is because tenants are actually an asset. I want to say that again. Tenants are actually, okay? So we kind of tend to think of the building as the asset, but I've never seen a building pay a mortgage. Your tenants pay the mortgage.
I love the way you phrase that.
Yeah.
That's so good.
So if you think of it like a 401k, right? You think of your building as your retirement, it's a 401k there. The employer matching contributions are being made by your tenants, right? Those tenants are very, very valuable. So we say that we're a tenant-centered company. And I can't emphasize that enough. That does not mean that we're a hotel and we, have a concierge. It doesn't mean any of that. What that means is that our tenants are human beings, that this is their home. We want it to feel like their home, and we want them to believe that we care about their home and that we're going to take good care of it. It's amazing. So we manage a building that's like 140 years old. I mean, this building is old as old can be, right? And something called a drum trap went bad in it. And this is an old cast iron thing that isn't used anymore. And the water, it had been going bad for a while, and the water had just been sitting in the ceiling. And it's an old lath and plaster ceiling, so its capacity to hold water was more than a sheetrock ceiling would be. So all of a sudden, there's a lot of water and there's a lot of damage. And so that could go a bunch of different ways, right? That could go real south, real quick. I mean, you could have tenants that are like saying, I have the right to move out, and you can, you know what I mean? But what we have learned over and over again, that communication is the key, right? People just want to know, they want to know that you understand that this is their home, right? They want to know, it's just about treating people with respect. And understanding that tenant is an asset and they deserve to be treated like the asset that they are. That's bottom. And the other thing you have to know is sometimes you get a tenant you just can't make happy. And the sooner you can part ways with them, the best for you and for them too. You do get tenants that it's like, man, this is just a difficult human being. It's people work, and sometimes people don't work, and that's just the fact of it. So
I think that's such a fascinating take on it. Both that you said tenants are assets, but that they're like your baseline, your base level argument for them is just respect. And what a sad society we live in when the base level of like, gosh, if you could respect each other, you're probably already above the other companies that you are competing against. Because some of them are just like, it's a numbers game. Pay your rent or you don't. And if you don't, you're out, right? And you said eviction is expensive. So what a breath of fresh air, what a fresh take on, we can all be humans. We can run a business that's profitable, and they can both exist at the same time. It's not one or the other.
It's not easy. What I'm going to say is that, and property management in general is just hard. It's way harder than you think it is. You've got, maintenance calls coming in every day. You have tenants that are frustrated with this or that. They have a dispute with how their ledger is. That isn't what they thought it was going to be. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts. And so it's difficult. And I understand. What I like to say is that in our first year of doing property management, we fell into every hole that we hear that property management companies get blamed for. I mean, every single one of them, we fell into it. And we're like, oh, we didn't ever think we'd be here. And then you kind of look around and you go, you know what? We need to get out of this hole. And then we need to figure out how to never get into it, And the reason that that's happened, and I'm really honest about it, is because it's difficult. This isn't my first business, and I'm telling you, this is not an easy business. But the trick to it is to always get really clear. It goes back to that, getting clear with the owner. We call it the roadmap, the owner's roadmap, that overarching goal that you're working towards. It's like, if you're staying focused on that and you're looking at that goals and you're staying tenant centered, you'll see what the problems are, and then you're able to address them and find a solution to them. You know what I mean? Rather than, letting them fester or just kind of being satisfied with, half of your work orders open at all times and, people that don't get refrigerators for a month, which happens all the time, So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Some things that you just don't think of, especially when you think of, I think of almost any industry, you're dealing with people, but you're almost dealing with two sets. You're dealing with your own employees, which has its own set of issues, concerns, can cause friction. And now you're dealing with, three sets: the investor, tenant, and then your own employees. So you're doing 3 doses of the people business.
So here's the other thing that I've learned on the employee side of it. So in the property management world, in general, I think what happens is your employees are asked to be generalists. In other words, so you hire somebody to do property management, right? And really, they're also doing collections. They're also doing checkouts. They're also, the list of the things that they have to do is like maybe 20 or 30 tasks, right? And then on the property management side, we hire people, we expect them to be, really, on the property maintenance side, we hire somebody into maintenance and we expect them to be able to, repair a garbage disposal and be able to patch a hole in sheetrock and make that look like it was never there, and be able to paint a room quickly and have it look nice, and be able to put in flooring. So what happens is, I think a lot of times in property management, we hire people expecting them to be generalists. And that is a very, very difficult thing, to get a team of people who are good at everything. That's the other thing that we've figured out, is that we want our employees to not have to worry about more than 3 things, because that's a manageable amount of 3 things. And actually, I heard somebody else say this and I kind of stole. Nothing is new under the sun, right? So it's like, but we're finding that really works, is to start organizing things in a way where somebody who is really good at selling units, getting tenants into units, showing units and getting them to sign the lease and making sure they're qualified, is a sales job. So that person it's having the right person in the right seat on the bus, right? And just getting really clear about what those jobs are, and honing down and getting the right people on the right seat on the bus, and not expecting them to be able to do everything, but having jobs kind of divvied down. I will tell you that does a lot for morale, business-wise, and also a lot for just getting things done.
Dave, could you touch a little bit on when you mentioned getting the right person under the right position, divvying up things, and that relationship there with velocity of money, getting things done efficiently and on time to keep keep money moving. Could you touch on that?
Yeah. I think this is an extremely important thing to talk about in property management, and it's the velocity of money. Give you an example from outside of the property management industry. So I have an uncle who was a consultant in the trucking world, trucking businesses for a long time. And there was a trucking company that they were negotiating with Walmart on prices, and Walmart just kept asking them for lower and lower prices. And they were like, we can't even afford to run these routes at these prices. We just can't do it. And so they started looking at it and looking at it. And what they realized was that from the time they were invoicing Walmart to the time they were getting their money was 90 days. So that meant that for 90 days, they had to figure out how to pay that trucker, how to put gas in that truck, do the maintenance on that truck. They had to cover all those expenses for 90 days, which means that they had to charge the previous 90 days a very high amount, right? They had to, their prices had to come way up here to cover that 90-day gap, right? So they went to Walmart and they said, hey, if you could pay us in 1 week for the time that, we could cut our prices way down. And Walmart said, well, what if we pay you in 24 hours? What could you do for us? And so what happened is they created a win-win. Walmart was able to get their prices down considerably for their trucking because they were able to turn that invoice around in 24 hours or less than 24 hours. And the trucking company didn't need to charge so much because they didn't have to carry. I mean, they were essentially lending money to Walmart, right? That for 90 days there, right? So that's the power of velocity of money. And if we were to just talk about that same thing, let's take maintenance, right? So it's not so different. If you go around and you talk to contractors or maintenance companies and you say, what's the thing that frustrates you anymore? What that frustrates you? It takes me 180 days to get paid. I invoice, it's taken them 90 days to pay my invoice. Well, yeah, that's frustrating. I mean, it's frustrating because you have to charge more to cover that gap, but nobody wants to pay more, right? Everybody wants Walmart prices. So that's one of the things that by bringing maintenance in-house, and most maintenance is just paid right out of rent. So we're able to get ourselves paid quickly. We're able to create velocity, and this all gets worked out with the owner. I mean, you know what I mean?
Right.
You know what I mean? They understand what's happening here. We're able to get paid with velocity, and because we're able to get paid with velocity, we're able to keep the maintenance costs down, right? But velocity also works in terms of vacancy. So if I'm not organized, right, and I find out if I look at my list and I go, geez, this person's lease is up in 15 days, and I find out they're not renewing, and all of a sudden in 15 days, I'm going to have a vacant unit. I am not ready to deal with that vacant unit, right? I have to go through that unit and figure out what's wrong with it. Then I have to order all the materials for that unit. And then I have to get the materials in that unit. And then I have to schedule guys to get in that unit and take care of that unit. And because I'm disorganized, I have to call two of them away to go deal with toilets that aren't working right in another building. So now, that tenant moves out in 15 days and I don't even have materials ordered. So it takes me 60 days to get the unit turned around. And so now there's a 60-day vacancy in that unit, and we've already talked that vacancy is the largest expense. If, however, I know 90 days ahead of time that unit is going to be vacant, and I know 60 days from then if I know 90 days that a lease is about to expire, and in 60 days the tenant has turned down the new lease, that means I know that I'm going to have a vacant unit. At 50 days to that unit, if I've ordered all the materials that are going to go into that unit, and I've got a team on a calendar to go in there and rehab it, that means that the day that it's vacant, I can have somebody in there working on it that has everything they need to get it done. And so what we're doing is we're creating velocity. So much of succeeding at property management is about velocity. You've got to get it done. I mean, it's just... and you got to get in and you got to get out, and the quality level has to be high. If you get a ton of callbacks on a rehab, a new tenant moves in there and there's 4 things that don't work, then that's a whole nother problem. So, yeah, I think...
David?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? I think a lot of times people, especially when they own properties, they think of property management companies as strictly an expense. But what I'm hearing you say is, there's a lot of value add that you can add to the property as far as keeping it up, keeping things, keeping vacancies down. Give me like your top 3 or 5 things that a good property management company can do to keep that property profitable or to value add property.
Well, I mean, again, the biggest problem that all properties have, the number one offender in terms of being profitable is vacancy. So I think that's what you want to know is like, and the other thing is not understanding what market rent for a building is. And so there's lots of tools out there to figure that out now. So I think That's it. Knowing what market rent is. Did you have a question?
Well, I was gonna say, do you, if I'm an owner and I come to you and I say, give me some suggestions for value adds that you see, in other comparable markets. Are you able to, give some suggestions for value adds?
Yeah, more than that. Yes, absolutely. So, you can start by looking at the curb appeal of a building, and that matters. Although you can't make the curb appeal above the class of the building, or you'll go broke. But you can be A of the class of the building. And then you go into the interior of the building and you begin to look at the quality of the hallways, the carpeting, the paint, the doors to the unit. Sometimes they look terrible, and it just gives you a bad impression. It makes it hard to rent. The laundry room, what condition is the laundry room in? And then, you go into the units themselves. I think there's a happy medium here. It is very easy to renovate beyond what your return is ever going to be. So it starts, and I think maybe a lot of property managements don't have this conversation. It starts with how much value do you think your building has? What do you think it's worth? What do you want it to be worth? Okay. If it's worth $850,000 and you'd like it to be worth $1 million, well, that's pretty easy to calculate. What we got to do, we've got to get the rents up to an average rent of right here. Well, if you want to get the rents up to an average rent of right here, you need the average rent to be $815 in this building. Well, then this is what we've got to do to that building to do that. We've got to do this to the curb appeal. We've got to do this to the common areas, and we've got to do this to the units. And we can put that out on a calendar, right? We can take a calendar out and say, this is when leases expire. This is when we can push rents up. We're going to let these roll into month to month so we don't have too many vacancies at one time. And we're going to try to strategically then raise the rent on these units at this time. You can put all that on a calendar and you can estimate pretty well ahead of time what all of that's going to cost. And I can say to an owner, I'm going to need this in January. Okay. I'm going to need this in March. Quarter by quarter, you can look at them and say, this is basically the cash we're going to need. And then look them straight in the face. Can you deliver on that? Do you know what I mean? Because if you can't deliver on that, then your expectations for this property are way off. You know what I mean? And then we need to go, okay, well, maybe this is more like a 5-year project to get it to where you want it to be. You know what I mean? So that's the value that I think a good property management company can add is getting so important to be clear about your goals and what the deliverables are and what that's going to take to do. And on our end, we have to be able to say, we can deliver on that. So it's the owner needs to be able to say, well, I can deliver on this cash that it's going to take to do that. We need to be able to say and be prepared on our end to be able to deliver on whatever, in terms of having enough leasing agents who are going to be able to go out there and get these units filled, to having the appropriate maintenance and unit turn personnel to get that done. So on both sides, having it scheduled out so you can see it is really important. I mean, I would want a property management company to be able to have a strategy to accomplish my goals.
And you said that right away. I mean, that's one of your big tickets, your value proposition is, hey, building owner, what do you even want? What are you looking to get out of using a property management company? I think even just setting the future and framing what that expectation looks like is so important and manages expectations for everyone. Because if you don't have that, then there's probably unspoken, they're thinking up here and you're thinking down here, and they're going right and you're going left. So I think it's so awesome that you guys have that clear conversation up front right away.
And then manage it along the way so that if we're off course, either we make a course correction or we say, hey, this wasn't the right course. So we need to make some adjustments here. It's about accountability on all sides.
Absolutely.
Oh, no, go ahead. Finish.
A lot of time what happens is an owner pops up in bed and they got an idea. And then they come to us with that idea. And that idea takes our time and our resources and pulls away from the goal that building was at. And then 3 months later, they're saying, well, why was my owner check so small? Why was my owner distribution so small? Well, remember those changes that you made? That didn't happen for free. So it's it's like a change order when you work with a construction company, right? So it's like if you've lined everything up in front, it's like if we get a brilliant idea or they get a brilliant idea, you can do a cost analysis of that brilliant idea before you start to actually, you can realize, that sometimes the good is the enemy of, or the good is the enemy of the best, or I don't know how to say that, but I don't know if I'm making sense there, but
Yeah, just again, making small tweaks along the way, but not waiting for perfection to make the change. Is not like if you change your course, then you're changing your course, and you have to expect that there's going to be resources, delays, things that you weren't anticipating before.
yeah, that's it exactly. Yeah.
David, if somebody wants to get a hold of you or your property management company, how do they do it?
The easiest way to get a hold of me is email. I love email because I can sort it and organize it and all that kind of stuff. And my email is dave@davejohanson.com. And Johanson is spelled Johanson. So dave@davejohanson.com. And you got me. That's the very best way to do it. If you want to look at our website, it's expensesdestroyprofits.com. That's simple. Expensesdestroyprofits.com. Yeah.
And the name of your property management company?
It's Daybreak Property Management. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, man. You are always a wealth of knowledge.
Well, it's fun to
Just learning so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Well, that concludes, I guess, our episode this week. What a great hour. This was just awesome. Thank you, David.
Yeah, just flies by. Dave, we really appreciate your time, and can't wait to see you at the next meetup.
All right. I look forward to it.